Hey everybody, welcome back to Garden Time with Belle. Today's video is all about getting thin. Hmm. I really mean it's all about me needing to thin out a bunch of the seedlings that I've started in my greenhouse. I have hundreds of plants for the summer season growing on. I started many of these things from seed in the last 2 or 3 months, and it is time for me to take care of them and thin them out. They need more space to grow. In addition to thinning out things here in the greenhouse in my seed starting trays, we're going to go out into the raised bed garden because I started some cool weather crops out there in the last month or so, and they're really growing well. But again, they need some thinning too. So we're going to thin in the greenhouse, we're going to thin seedlings out in the garden, and last but not least, I am going to plant some leeks and onions that I started from seed. So I've turned the camera around and I just want to take you on a little quick inventory of what is growing in the greenhouse that I'm going to be growing in my summer garden. So here on the top shelf, let's take a look at what I've got. So I've got some ageratum in the back. I've got some leeks, plenty of tomato plants in 8 different varieties. Here are my onions. I've got some marigolds and nasturtiums. I've got some beautiful celosia flowers. I've got, I think, this is my ageratum seedlings. Got some parsley, got some wonderful basil down here, and some gomphrena. Some of you have asked, and I thought, yeah, this will be a good time to mention it. So here we are in my greenhouse, and you can see there's a cover on the outside of the greenhouse. We like to put that cover on, usually in April, May at the latest. And we keep that cover on until September because it gets super duper hot in here and it can control the temperature and make it much more pleasant to work in. However, because I grow so many things in the greenhouse and start seedlings, what we do on this side, which is west facing, is we stop the shade cloth about right here. And so it's not shaded here. And of course, down here, it's not shaded. And that allows maximum sunlight to be hitting the seedlings and helping them grow. So that's just a little trick that we like to do to maximize the sunlight in the greenhouse in the early part of the year. Then as these end up all going out into my garden the first couple of weeks of May, we will roll the rest of the shade cloth down and make it much, much nicer to work inside the greenhouse in our very hot Missouri summers. So before I actually get into thinning, the question is, why bother thinning? Some of you that are newer gardeners might not understand the importance of doing that. And the main reason to thin out your seedlings, especially things like this that I started from seed, is because if you have too many little plants, little seedlings, as we call them, in these seed starting trays, they compete with each other. They compete for soil space to grow additional roots. They compete for moisture, and you've got to keep your seedlings moist. You water them on a regular basis. You don't want to let them dry out. And I also fertilize my young seedlings once a week. And so I don't want them to have to fight with each other for nutrients and for moisture. And it just really improves the health of your plants. So that's what today is all about. And so I'm going to let you see a close-up view of some of the thinning I'm going to do and the way that I'm going to approach thinning. Today, mostly, I will be thinning by taking my garden snips and I'm just going to cut out the additional plants that I don't want to keep. However, earlier in the season, there were some things that I grew, like, for instance, my beautiful Maverick geraniums that I'm growing on. Look at these beauties. And I started 48 of these plants, And I needed to thin them out earlier in their growing, but I didn't want to waste any. So I actually ended up pulling them apart and then potting them up. So they all started out in the little seed starting trays when they were babies. And then I potted them up in these bigger containers to let them get really big. Of course, there's only one in each of these 4-inch pots so that they can really develop a healthy root system and don't have to compete with their neighbors. Okay, I think I'll start with my little ageratum in the Timeless series and just brought the camera in close so you all can see the process. So to get a better chance at things germinating, a lot of times I will sow more than one seed into each one of these 24 cells, which I did in this case. And so you can see here that I've got a couple of plants in many of these. So all I'm going to do is just come in here. I'm going to select the one to keep the one that I think is the most vigorous and growing well. And I am going to simply snip off the one that I don't need. So see these two? I'm going to just take this one out. And that is all there is to it. So I'm just going to go through the rest of this tray, and rather than pull out and disturb the soil, it's better really just to snip them off. And then, of course, these can go in my compost bin. So they will. They'll go in a little tub drug and out to my compost. But that's really all there is to it. Now, if I really, really wanted to save these, I would probably let these grow bigger. So a couple of more weeks. And then I might choose to pull the whole thing out gently, separate them out, and create more plants. So like you see how these are two pretty nice looking plants. And actually I have a hole right here. So I don't know, maybe it's worth me doing that now. So I'm going to show you how to do that. Let me grab a little set of tongs and I'll just show you that method as well. All right, so hopefully I've got my camera zoomed in where you all can see. So this one little cell has two really nice looking plants. So here's what I'm going to try to do. I'm going to try to gently pull them out. Ooh, and I see some nice healthy white roots. And I'm going to try to tease these two little plants apart. And I did. And then I am going to take one of them and pop that into this one cell that didn't have any coming up. And then I'll tuck this little baby back in to its original cell. And I might want to put a little extra soil around this one. I'll do that in a little bit. So again, that's one thing you can do, is just pull them out, tease them apart. Some plants don't like their roots messed with too much. Others don't really care. And so I'm just going to get after the rest of this with the snipping method. Can see here now I have just one plant in each of these cells. So I will have 24 plants, and hopefully doing this, they'll really start putting on some growth, and I'll be able to put them out into my garden in probably about 3 weeks from now. So that is all there is to it. You got to see the basic process of me using my little snips, taking out the plants I don't want, making sure I leave one healthy plant per cell. So I've got 24 pretty starts here for my ageratum. Next, I will be pulling down some of my trays from above, doing the exact same process. So, it's my garden chore today to get this done. So I'll just speed up the video, take care of that. After I finish that, then I'm going to show you how I'm going to take some of my leeks that I started and some of my onions where they are right there. And I'm going to tease them apart and take out trays of those to go right into my raised bed vegetable garden. So I just need to clean up my workspace a little bit here and then get on to my next task, which is to separate out my leeks and onions so that I can plant them up into the garden. All right, so I got my thinning done. I did my little cleanup and I pulled down a couple of seed trays, the leeks and the onions. Why am I choosing to do this next part of the process? Well, number one, I always set goals for myself every year. And one of my goals for this channel this year is to make sure that if I have posted a video, a previous video about how I did something like starting things from seed, I want to make sure I'm doing follow-ups to that so that you all can see the progress that these plants have made, some that were fails, some that did great. I want to bring you along on that. I don't know about you, but I also watch YouTube gardeners and I love a lot of the channels that I subscribe to. However, sometimes some of those folks, those gardeners, don't give me what I need in terms of making sure they show follow-ups to some things that they've planted or done. And then it kind of disappears and I'm like, well, whatever happened to the plant that you were raving about that you started? How did that go? So this project today is going to give you a little sneak peek and look at how my leeks and onions did and why we're going to be doing this. So the leeks I started 2 months ago. The onions I started from seed a month ago. So 2 months and 1 month. What you need to know about leeks and onions is that they can go outside into nature, in the ground, about 4 weeks before your average last frost. And so that's why in my zone, I'm tackling this today because where I live, not only am I in a zone 6, but more importantly, I know when my average last frost is. And for my area of the country, it's usually around tax day. And so we're about 4 days from tax day. So really, I could have put these out a couple of weeks ago, but they will be just fine. So 4 to 6 weeks. Leeks and onions can take some cool temperatures. They can't take a lot of hard freezes, but they will be fine with a little frost. And I looked at my long-term forecast and actually we won't have any super cool nights. I think we've turned the corner. I really do. The next 10 days, it won't get below, according to the forecast, 45 to 50 degrees at night, which is amazing. And it is go time. So timing is right. Check your forecast, follow the weather in your area, and that'll help guide you on when it's time to put things out in nature. So I have the focus hopefully in nice and close so you can see my beautiful leeks here and the process I'm going to use to kind of tease them apart and lay them out in this tray, and then we'll go out into the raised bed garden and get them in the ground. So leeks, I've got my little tags here, and for my onions. So let's start with the leeks. So I am going to go in here with my little seed starting tongs and I'm going to pull out from this one cell, and I have 2 plants right here, just like so. So I'm going to just lay these in my tray and then we will be able to plant them individually out in the raised bed garden. Ah, look at those beautiful roots. You want to see beautiful, healthy roots. And I do. So that's a good thing. So yeah, that's the process. Pretty simple. Now that I have my leeks separated, just need to do the exact same thing to my onions. Now these are not going to form up big onions. They're going to form up scallions, uh, which I love to eat and love to cook with. So same process of separating them out. This cell looks like maybe two. Oh, look at that. Yep, two onions right there. So I'll just do the same process, and then we'll finally get out and get these in the ground in my raised bed garden. Well, I managed to get them all separated somewhat. I'll do some more separating out in the raised bed garden, but you know, I want to mist these a little bit because I don't want them drying out for sure before I get them in the ground. So I'm just going to mist them. My green onion starts were much uh, wetter in their seed starting trays than my leeks. I don't know. You know, I check on my trays every day, and these just were a little bit dry, but that's okay. I will just whoop, give them a little drink, and next stop, raised bed garden. All right, let's take the leeks and onions where they're going to live, which is right in this raised bed with my carrots. So here we are in one of the raised beds where I'm going to plant my leeks and onions. They are going to live with my carrots, which I have 2 rows of carrots that desperately need thinning. You all saw me plant a bunch of carrot seeds, and they are up. So I will thin those later after we get our leeks and onions in. But the important thing to know about this is something I mentioned the other day when I planted out my broccoli and my potatoes. You want to do a little research on companion planting, which veggies grow well together. They need the same kind of environment, and they help each other in terms of pests and diseases. And just so happens, carrots and onions and leeks are wonderful companion plants. And they also, all three happen to be root crops, right? So, you know, they grow below the soil and you harvest. Of course, you can use the tops of green onions, but leeks in particular, what's under the soil is really the gold that you want in terms of that vegetable. So yeah, I'm not sure exactly how I'm gonna put them in here, but I'm gonna just take those little seedlings and start the process of getting them in here. Of course, the very first thing I'm going to do to this bed is I am going to amend it with some of that garden tone fertilizer. Again, it's a nice organic fertilizer, things that you plan to eat and feed to your friends and family. I just would really recommend that you go with organic fertilizer, not a synthetic chemical. Um, you know, there's really affordable now and available. So choose organic, I think, when you can. That's always best, especially when it comes to food crops. All right, so I've done that, and then I'm just going to get these little starts plugged in here. Last step, of course, will be watering them in and getting them nestled in. And, you know, they're going to be a little bit shocked probably because they've had their roots kind of pulled apart. But I promise you, I will bring you back for follow-ups on how they're doing a week from now, 2 weeks from now, etc., and have you follow along and see how they do. So here we go. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to use my hand rake to kind of rough up the soil so that it's going to be a little bit easier for me to put my seedlings in the ground. Make it nice and fluffy. And again, spacing, you know, In a raised bed gardens, you can space things much closer than you would in a traditional in the ground garden. So I'm just going to eyeball it. Of course, the green onions, the scallions, they're not going to get bigger than this big around in the soil, so they can really be plugged in closely together. Leeks, of course, they will get much thicker underground, so of course you want to give them a little bit more space than you would the green onion starts. So that's what I am thinking about as I decide to place them here in this raised bed. All right. All right, we're going to move down on this end and we are going to put in some leeks. And I think I'm going to do sort of the same thing, but I need to space my leeks a little further apart. So I think I'm going to space them, let's do 6 inches apart just to be safe. So I'm going to create a couple of rows here so they have room to grow, but also not so much room that I'm wasting space, because I plan to even put some flowers and other herbs probably around the edges of this bed as the season progresses. So my final step today is I'm just going to hand water these in and just monitor them. They're going to be in shock from being transplanted. You can definitely direct sow leeks and onions into your garden. You absolutely can. Just start your seeds in soil. But I chose this year to try to do the transplant. And actually last year, I transplanted leeks from inside the greenhouse to out in the garden, and they did great. Green onions, scallions, typically I just broadcast seed. So I don't know how they'll do, but it's really going to be important for me to keep the soil moist so that they can get their roots started. So yeah, that's all that is left for this project. And then I have a lot of thinning to do out here in the garden. I'm not going to bring you along for that because I sort of showed you my method on how I thinned my seedlings inside in their seed cell trays, but the same thing applies out here in my garden. So I have carrots, loads of carrots, so I need to thin those. I've got beautiful rainbow Swiss chard in this other bed. They need thinning. And some of my leaf lettuce, actually my head lettuce, I need to thin those out so that they'll have more space to actually put on full heads. But the other lettuce that I grow that I will not thin is kind of loose leaf lettuce, right? Where